Welcome to the Backs to the Wall podcast. Four mates talking all things football with some special guests and other sporting shenanigans thrown in as well. This week on The Wall, we're bringing you our top 5 most ridiculous moments in football. It's also the return of our Send Him to the Reserves feature, where we each nominate a player who's been particularly poor, both on or off the pitch, and then vote to send one of those players to the reserves. Lastly, we'll be bringing you our lockdown accumulator, with still plenty of football to bet on during COVID-19. So why don't we get underway then with our top 5 most ridiculous moments in football. Jamie, why don't you get us underway?
Coming in at 5th place, Rod Stewart helped take the Scottish Cup 5th round draw in 2017, and he seemed to be quite inebriated when he was making the draw. He was joined by then Hibs manager Alan Stubbs, and through the course of the whole draw, it was just everything was just focused on him. I mean, I couldn't take my eyes off him when I was watching. He was clearly inebriated, and he was raising his hands right up to the ceiling and then diving his hand back down to pull out the numbers of the team that were next up. It was quite insane. This went on for the entire draw. He also seemed to grope the chairman of the SFA, who was like adjudicating the show, which is quite. I'm struggling to keep it together here saying this, because there's so many things that he was doing that were just so unprofessional. I believe he also had some sort of cheetah print scarf on that looked quite dishevelled amongst it. And Alan Stubbs over on the right hand side, he was drawing the away teams, and there was a particular occasion when you could see that he was struggling to keep it together with the antics that Rod Stewart was pulling off, and he mistakenly pulled out the number 9 and claimed it was number 6, or vice versa, and there was a bit of a debacle over whether or not it was Greenock Morton playing or someone else. So it was a bit of a shambles throughout, but I'm sure one of you boys can talk me through a bit more of what went on that day.
Yeah, so Celtic had just played Albion Rovers in the 4th round, and they'd beaten them 3-0. So I'm assuming that Sir Rod Stewart had a couple of shandies at the game. I mean, it just got more out of hand as the draw went on. Like, as the draw kind of progressed, you started to realise just how smashed he was. And there was petitions being drawn up to get Rod Stewart to host the next football draw, whether it was for the World Cup or for the Euros. Have Rod Stewart in every time, steaming doing these draws, because it was just so funny.
It was also particularly hilarious when Rod Stewart brought out a home tie for Alan Stubbs' Hibs team, and he gave out a big cheer when he got that.
Did he not celebrate as well when he pulled out Celtic for home as well? I seem to remember him like doing a fist punch in the air. I think watching this, I think we were all together at the time, and it was more just disbelief as to what was going on. It's probably one of my favourite cup draws I've ever seen, just for the sheer disbelief as to what was happening. Like, in a time now where they're making cup draws less prestigious when having them on the one show and like a Morrison's car park, like the Carabao Cup. This was meant to be quite a serious draw. It was in the standard setup. And special guest Rod Stewart, what could go wrong? Just kind of like the enthusiasm he has for it when he's dipping into the pots, pulling out the balls. It's unbelievable. It is well worth the watch.
It's as if he's drawn the bingo balls down at the pot.
So coming in at number 4, we have Darren Bent's beach ball goal in 2009. It's a goal, or a memory in football that has a special place in my heart, as I was there at the Sunderland game. And it was probably what you could have described as a backs to the wall performance. The one thing I remember is it kind of coming across the box and Darren Bent just shooting, and it just taking this big deflection and went in. I was on the halfway line, so didn't really know much about it. Was just more than happy to see his score against Liverpool. And it wasn't until, I think, after the game where we were on the way back and they were saying that it deflected off a beach ball. Looking from where I was, it just looked like it was a player. The ridiculous thing about the whole story is that the goal shouldn't have even counted. I think on Sky you can see one of the Liverpool fans throwing a Liverpool beach ball onto the pitch, and about 10 minutes later Darren Bent's shot ends up deflecting off this beach ball. For some reason Pepe Reina ends up going to save the beach ball instead of the ball, and Sunderland go 1-0 up and actually go on to win that game.
Yeah, it's crazy really. You think Darren Bent scored over 100 Premier League goals, and this is the one that you probably are going to remember him for. A pretty innocuous shot towards Pepe Reina, and out of all the things you expected to deflect off, and like you said, it was a Liverpool fan that threw onto the pitch, and I think it was a kid, wasn't it?
He said that the guy that actually threw the ball onto the pitch said when he got home he was actually physically sick in his garden. It actually turned out quite bad for him, because I think he received numerous death threats from it, which of course isn't great.
There's a quite interesting fact now about that beach ball. It's displayed at the moment in the National Football Museum in England. It's got pride of place there, and it'll forever be remembered.
I think another funny memory from this, it actually became a question on The Chase, did it not?
I think it did, actually. Yeah, I do remember this episode of The Chase. If I remember rightly, the woman who was answering the questions, she answered it wrong, very much answered it wrong. I can't remember what the other option was, but one was obviously the correct answer of beach ball, and the other was ice cream van. And that's what she went for. She went for the ball deflecting off an ice cream van. A strange choice, a bold choice, but the wrong one.
Next up is number 3. What do we have here?
At number 3, we have an unusual situation. Now, biting a fellow professional football is generally frowned upon. To do it once is pretty bad form. To do it twice, well, really that's inexcusable. But to do it 3 times, that proves you have to be a certain amount of arsehole to do that. Luis Suarez, of course, probably the most famous teeth in football. 3 times he has bitten a fellow professional. The third occasion came at the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, playing for Uruguay in a 1-0 win against Italy. He was quite clearly on camera shown to bite Italian defender Giorgio Chiellini on the shoulder, and he received a 4-month ban for this.
Funny thing from my personal perspective, being a Sunderland fan, after the second incident when he bit Branislav Ivanovic, his return game was of course against Sunderland at the Stadium of Light, where he came on and scored 2 goals against us, and I think we got beat 3-1. Kind of a typical tale of us being a Sunderland fan there.
I suppose making light of this situation, there were quite a number of folk who took advantage of Luis Suarez, this terrible reputation that he had. At the 2014 World Cup, the betting agents Betsun actually put across on their platforms that they were giving odds of 175 to 1 for Luis Suarez to bite an opponent. And I remember reading an article about a gentleman from Sweden who ended up winning £1,200 off a bet he had on for Suarez to actually bite an opponent. They ended up having to pay out £44,000 in the end. So that was spread across about 167 different people. So, I mean, it clearly shows that people thought that he hadn't changed and that he might do it again.
It's quite a weird defence mechanism to go into to bite someone, and it's quite a bizarre thing to. You get that angry, you just want to bite someone. I mean, punch someone, you can understand, but to bite. And I seen that he defended it by saying it was pent up frustration and couldn't contain it anymore, like his anger.
Yeah,
I don't know. When I get angry, I don't go sink my teeth into them.
I just find it so crazy. In the first instance, it was back in 2010 when he was playing for Ajax, and it was a 0-0 draw. I mean, it wasn't like it was some sort of major cup final that he was getting badly tackled all the time. He'd lost the game badly or anything. A 0-0 draw, and you go and sink your teeth into the shoulders of your opponent. It's just crazy.
I think what's strange about the third incident in the World Cup is that it doesn't seem to be a direct reaction to anything that Chiellini's done. The two are running towards the Italian goal. I think the ball's out on the left-hand side. Someone's about to whip the cross in, and Suarez, he has to sort of like change course to sink his teeth into him. It's just so bizarre. It's just something that I don't think many people can understand. Why on earth would you do that? And you can see the bite marks on Chiellini's shoulder just after he's done it. He goes up to the referee and shows him the bite marks, and you could see it on TV live. But somehow the referee didn't deem that enough evidence to actually send Suarez off at the time, which is quite puzzling, I would have thought.
Well, you'd like to think now that it's all over, as the last instance that he did bite someone was that 2014 World Cup. Hopefully now, 6 years on, that's him got out of his system.
So number 2 then on our top 5 most ridiculous football moments ever. It's Monday, the 28th of February 2005. Norwich look like they could be heading towards relegation. They're hosting Man City at home, and it's a pretty subdued atmosphere. The hosts have gone to a 2-0 lead within the first 16 minutes. Man City claw a couple of goals back, so they go in at half-time, 2 apiece, and the fans really do need someone to come out and motivate them. And in an attempt to G up the home faithful, it's celebrity chef and club shareholder Delia Smith who comes out and grabs the microphone and then begins her drunken rant.
So Delia comes on at half time. You know, when you're a fan yourself, there's nothing more inspirational when someone gives a bit of home cooking advice as well as telling her own fans to show a bit more passion. So she opened by saying, "A message for the best football supporters in the world." Strong start. "We need a 12th man here. It's a bit questionable going after your own fans." And then this is where the tip of the iceberg comes, where she starts going, "Where are you? Where are you? Let's be having you. Come on." It's probably one of the most memorable speeches on a football pitch for just how bizarre and unnecessary it is. I mean, if you're 2-2 in a game anyway, you as a fan will be already annoyed at the players and probably giving them your own abuse or kind of geeing yourself up. You don't need your owner to come on and say something like that.
This is another instance of maybe a little bit too much alcohol being consumed in the hospitality section, because she was, many people suggested that she'd had one too many glasses of red wine before she came onto the pitch, which she strongly denies that. She admits that she had a few glasses with her meal before the game, but strongly denies getting tanked up during the first half and coming out at 2-2 with Man City and jeering the crowd the way she did. If you watch the video, which I strongly encourage you to, coming towards the end of her rant or her G up of the crowd, you can hear the boos starting to ring out. And this is from her own support. So it's really interesting and something that I really do suggest that you look up on YouTube after this.
I think that the reaction to this speech might have been a little bit better had it been delivered by someone the fans respected more in footballing terms rather than a TV chef. Now, if Delia Smith came onto the pitch and started giving me advice about how to cook my roast dinner, then I think I would certainly listen to it and take heed of that advice. But if someone like Delia Smith came onto the pitch and told me how to support my team, I don't think I would take it too well. And it's probably not a surprise that Norwich fans didn't take too well to it, and in fact they then went on and lost the game.
Yeah, she was heavily criticised for it, and as you say, it didn't spur Norwich on to victory. They lost that game. Fowler scored an injury time in the end, and yeah, also worth noting that they got relegated that year, unfortunately. So
I think one of the funniest things is the "let's be having you" bit. Just in the sense of, when would you ever hear that? When do you cheer up people and say "let's be having you"? It's just one of the most ridiculous things.
It's kind of like she's having a go at the fans, like, you know, like.
I mean, it
she's quite
look
slurred
like it's planned
in her speech, in her voice.
It is. It's the slurred kind of words, and then also the aggression in her voice. It's like she's not trying to motivate them. She's shouting at them. 4 very worthy nominations there for our top 5 most ridiculous footballing moments. Before we get to number 1, why don't we go through some of our honourable mentions which didn't quite make the list?
I'll jump in with the first one. I've got the Newcastle fan punching a horse after Sunderland beat Newcastle 3-0 at St James's Park. I mean, this is ridiculous as to why anyone in their right mind would do such a thing.
I'm assuming this is a police horse.
A police horse, yes. So
he's not just gone down to the stables after a few lagers.
He claimed it was self-defense, but if you watch the video, he's clearly stood with his fists up, ready to punch it. For anyone who doesn't know, Scott actually has horses himself. And I'm just going to ask you a quick question, Scott. How would you react if Rangers had just beat Park Thistle and for Jamie's revenge, he goes and strikes one of your horses?
Well, due to knowing Jamie for as long as I have, that would actually make things a lot worse. Now, just anyone punching a horse, for me, is a jail-worthy offence. However, if Jamie came up and deliberately aimed at me on my horse, then I think our friendship would probably be ending quite
Did
soon.
he punch the horse in its face?
Yes.
Right. I thought he punched it on its side, did he not?
Did he not punch it like in the note? Oh, yeah, it might have been the side.
Now, although we've had a little giggle at this, animal abuse is not tolerated.
Yes, no, absolutely not. But it certainly is a ridiculous football moment.
So I'll jump in now with it's back to Newcastle again. But it doesn't involve horses. It was back in 2005 when Newcastle were playing. I believe it was Aston Villa, and they were losing this game, and I think they were already down to 10 men. But Lee Bowyer and Kieran Dyer, who were players in the same team, decided they had a bit of a heated exchange on the pitch, and it ended up with both of them coming to blows. I think it was Kieran Dyer's shirt ended up getting ripped off, and they both ended up receiving red cards. It was just crazy to watch two players on the same team going at each other, full on bare knuckle fight, and both getting sent off and thrown down the tunnel.
I think that was ridiculous, of course, seeing two players fight. But another thing that just sticks in the memory for me is when they got sent off, the referee's cards the red card was actually circle. I don't know if anyone else remembers that. That's just such a big memory for me.
I've never seen that since.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe seeing circle red cards, and I've never seen them again, so I don't know if it was a trial run.
But what is interesting is that Graham Souness was the manager of Newcastle in that game, and one of our other honourable mentions includes Graham Souness, if one of you boys want to take it away.
Graham Souness, of course, known for being a mellow character, not really starting much. As manager of Galatasaray, when they played Fenerbahce, I believe that was Fenerbahce, Galatasaray won, I think, and Souness was carrying the Galatasaray flag and actually put it in the middle of Fenerbahce's ground, which I think nearly started a riot in the city at the time.
I think he was also jeering up the rival chairman who had put messages out into the media circulation saying that Souness was a cripple and he wouldn't achieve anything in the game, and this was Souness getting a bit of his own back against Fenerbahce by jeering up the home fans, which they had to, I believe, the players and staff had to run under the police barriers and through the tunnel and be protected that way.
Yeah, I can't imagine the animosity with it and amongst the fans when Souness puts the rivals flag in the middle of the pitch. I mean, just speaking from my perspective, if that happened for Newcastle against Sunderland, it would just be riots, and it just brings me back a memory for my the first game I ever went to. I think I must have been 6 or 7 at the time, so not really in with the fierce rivalry with Newcastle yet. We stood behind the goal, and about 20 minutes in or something, this guy rips off his jacket and has a Newcastle top on, and honestly, about 5 to 10 people just jumped on him, and police started flooding in from everywhere. Just being so young, I had no idea what was happening. But now, of course, I realise I just couldn't believe someone would do that. And I remember seeing him after the game, like in handcuffs and that. And yeah, with this situation, I can just imagine it being the same.
Would you be one of those people, Andrew, that would now jump in and attack that man?
Probably not, but I would be disgusted in it. I may vent my anger to him with my words rather than my fists.
You wouldn't be going outside the ground to punch a horse.
No. I'll leave that for my neighbours.
Make love, not war.
Our last honourable mention is probably one of my favourites, purely because of this person denying it every time it gets mentioned. It is Ashley Young when a bird seemingly pooed in his mouth. If you see this video, it's clear as day that something
I've not seen it.
Like you need to see it it'll be on YouTube or something, and it gets brought up quite a few times to Ashley Young because it's quite a well-known video, and I've seen him deny it on numerous occasions, which makes it even funnier because it's clear something does enter his mouth.
It's some great slapstick comedy when you see a jobby fly through the air and just go straight into his gob.
Where was it?
Well, he was playing for Man United. I don't know.
And how does he react? Is he disgusted or?
I think he just spits. I'm pretty sure he just spits it out.
He's in the middle of shouting at someone and he just carries on shouting. It's the fact that he's come out in several interviews and he just insists that it didn't happen. He says He's trying to say that the images were basically doctored to make it look like a bird had pooed in his mouth, which I don't know about you, but I don't think I buy that one.
I don't think someone would go to the extent of editing a poo flying into his mouth.
So that leaves us with number 1 on our top 5 most ridiculous moments in football ever.
Yeah, let me take you back to January the 25th, 1995. Manchester United are away at Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park. Man United were second at the time in the league and would have gone top with a win at a Crystal Palace side who were struggling and fighting against relegation. Now, the game finished 1-1 after a late Crystal Palace equaliser, but the headlines were taken up by United's talismanic forward Eric Cantona. Cantona was sent off for kicking the Palace defender Richard Shaw, having grown frustrated at the close man marking that the Palace defence had employed against him. Now, we are used to seeing players getting pelters from opposition fans, but Cantona rather took exception to one man's abuse. As he was heading towards the tunnel, the Frenchman aimed what can only be described as a kung fu kick at the fan, as well as throwing punches all the way to the tunnel. He subsequently pled guilty to an assault charge, had to do 120 hours of community service, and was banned from football for 9 months.
With this being in 1995, of course, well, me, Jamie and Scott weren't born then, but Michael, it must live long in your memory.
Yeah, well, I would have been 1. So I don't remember particularly well. But Eric Cantona, of course, he was such a big player for Man United, and I think fans seem to hate him just because he was good. Like, you know, they latched on to that, and they loved to abuse him. But it's just one of the most surreal things, even watching the video, that you could ever see. Like for that to happen in a football game, you know.
I think typical of the character himself, he actually said it was a great feeling, but did admit it was a mistake. So that's good from him.
Quite interestingly, when the match finished, players spilled it down the tunnel and into the dressing room. It just sort of sums up Sir Alex Ferguson. Instead of getting really frustrated and venting his abuse at Eric Cantona for getting himself sent off, he actually goes crazy at his centre backs for not marking Gareth Southgate, and he's quoted as shouting, "Who the f*** was marking Southgate?" and then briefly looking at Cantona and saying, "I'm disappointed with you."
Yeah, and he blamed the referee as well, didn't he, Ferguson? He said that if the referee had a better handle on the game, it wouldn't have come to that, because I think Cantona was kind of getting, there was a few dodgy challenges going on him, so he was already riled up, and then the Palace fan who shouted something very, very nasty at him in French about Cantona's mother, I think. Yeah, he just saw red there, and one of the more impressive kicks that you might see.
He rather interestingly was quoted. This is after, I believe, the appeal against the conviction had been rejected. He said, "When the seagulls follow the trawler, it's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much." He then left the press conference, and that was the last we heard from him on the issue.
Yeah,
for 9 months.
Yes, because I was reading about that as well, and the press in the room, like, they were just so confused. They weren't sure. Some of them were laughing, others were just looking at each other, wondering what had just happened. He was certainly an interesting one, Cantona.
It was quite big for Man United as well, losing their key striker. I mean, I think Cantona had 12 goals already, and it was January, so he was on for quite a good season, and Man United actually went on to lose the title to Blackburn, so it was big for them missing out. And yeah, it's probably one of the more memorable incidents. I think it was quoted as being the most famous common assault case in the entire English legal system.
Despite Sir Alex Ferguson taking a pretty laxed approach to what happened, Man United did eventually get their act together, and they did ban him initially for 4 months, and he did end up getting fined a total of what was initially £20,000, which eventually did rise to 30 grand. So that was, I suppose, they tried to put him in his place after it and ensure that nothing like that was ever to happen in the English game again, because it was some kung fu kick. Jackie Chan would be proud.
Did anyone know he actually played beach football for France and managed them?
Yes.
I think that's very bizarre. From after leaving Man United, he went to play football for France in the beach football, I don't know, would it be the World Cup or something, and then went on to actually manage the French beach football team.
When seagulls follow the trawler, it's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you. So strange. So those were our top 5 most ridiculous footballing moments of all time. We will now move on, and it's the return of our Send Him to the Reserves feature. We each nominate a player who we think has been particularly poor either on or off the pitch at some point in their career, and then we'll vote to send one of those players to the reserve. So, of course, we ended up sending Josie Altidore to the reserves last week after his unbelievably poor goal-scoring record in the Premier League. So who wants to get us underway this week?
Since my selection won last week, I'll jump in and go first. Went for a bit more of a risky one. I've changed tactics considering 3 out of the 4 players last week had a Sunderland connection. But don't worry, I've got a long list of Sunderland players that will be getting my nomination. This week I've went for Bradley Wood. Not really a household name. You might be asking, who is he? Don't you worry, I'll tell you. He's currently serving a 6-year ban in football for match fixing, which will expire in 2024. This was when he was a Lincoln player. In his first season at Lincoln, he was actually voted the Player of the Year, and then the following season, which was when he got banned. This was in the team's FA Cup run to the quarter-finals, and during games against Ipswich and Burnley, a tribunal had found that he'd been deliberately booked in both games. Now, I don't know if you've seen the video. If you just search Bradley Wood match fixing or whatever, you need to look at some of the tackles that he was putting in. I think you can hear the commentator say in one game that he'd put in a numerous amount of heavy tackles, and then the game against Burnley, there's like an altercation with all the players, and you can just see him purposely shoving players and getting involved just to try and get himself booked. It noted that I think several of his close friends had put unusual bets on him getting booked, and then he'd actually admitted to betting on himself on 22 occasions.
I remember them winning at Burnley, didn't they? They had a really good run in that FA Cup.
Yeah, well, they beat Ipswich and Burnley, and you're thinking this guy, I mean, he won Player of the Season last year. He's got it all to kind of play for, quite a promising career. Lincoln were on the up at that stage. But then, well, that year he was evidently found guilty of match fixing. He gets my vote this week for one, being stupid enough for match fixing, and then potentially ruining his career.
Yeah, match fixing is such a prevalent thing in football, and it's one of the hardest things to weed out, and I think that's going to be quite hard to beat, Andrew. Take it away, Scott.
Well, I was torn this week on whether to stick with a player based on, statistical evidence of poor performance or something like that. However, I've opted to go for someone simply because I don't like him. This is the West Brom winger, Matt Phillips. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, Matt Phillips, he's quite a good player. Premier League experience with QPR, with West Brom, with Blackpool. Why are you voting for him? Well, let me tell you, I have seen this person play in the flesh twice. And both times I saw him play, it was for Scotland, and he put in probably 2 of the worst performances I've ever seen from not just an international footballer, but any footballer. One of those games was at home to Slovakia a couple of years back, World Cup qualifier. He just looked absolutely knackered after about 20 minutes. It was so bizarre. The other game I saw him play, now he plays as a winger normally, but he played up front on his own for Scotland in a friendly against the Dutch up in Aberdeen a couple of years ago. We were losing 1-0 with about 2 minutes to go. Scotland had a corner, great opportunity to head in a last-minute equaliser. A great ball gets whipped in. Matt Phillips jumps, and there are probably 3 yards of space all around him. He jumps up and misses the ball completely. And this is one of very few times that I stood up out of my seat in that game and just started hurling abuse at him for this, because he'd been absolutely shocking for the entire game, and I've never forgotten it. And in my eyes, he'll never redeem himself.
You are usually quite a mellow gentleman, Scott, so it does raise my eyebrows a bit to hear that you're getting off your seat and giving abuse.
It just every time I see him in the Scotland squad, I just shake my head, because I've seen him score an absolute screamer for West Brom against Nottingham Forest, I think last year in the Championship. But every time I've seen him play for Scotland, he's just been absolutely awful, and he keeps getting played up front, and I don't know why.
Matt Phillips for me is quite an interesting one, because I remember seeing him play for QPR against Sunderland. I think QPR beat us like 3-1 or something. like teams usually do. But he had an absolute worldie of a game. He tore us to pieces. I don't even know who. I can't even remember our team that day. It was probably shite. But yeah, he had an absolute blinder of the game. He was crossing balls all over. He was beating all of our players for pace, and I've only got good memories of him.
Right, well, I mean, I just simply refuse to believe that this fellow could ever have a game like that. As I say, I'll just never forgive him for those 2 games that I saw him. He was absolutely horrendous also away to Slovenia. Don't remember that one, Jamie? 2-2 draw,
yeah.
And he played the 90 minutes, and he was just awful, absolutely awful.
Scotland's home game to Malta is where I remember him being particularly poor. His crossing ability, finishing ability, passing, everything. And as you say, he seemed to be absolutely gubbed after about 20 minutes. He just had no engine on him, and he just seemed like he didn't want to be there.
Thank you, next.
I'm sure we're all quite guilty now and again of watching a football match, and especially if your team's playing and saying, now that's the worst player I've ever seen. But now, this gentleman truly is the worst player I've ever seen. His name is Gabriel Piccolo, and he signed for Partick Thistle back in 2014. Now, this boy wasn't a footballer. The ball would get played back to him in the centre of defence. He'd have nobody on him, and he'd have the freedom to make any pass around the pitch. And this man would balloon the ball out of the pitch as if he had Messi breathing down his neck. It was honestly, it was comical. To add insult to injury, he couldn't defend at all either. His heading ability was terrible. General passing, his clearances. To back up my claim here, after Partick Thistle, when he stunningly made 17 appearances, I remember whenever I saw him on the team sheet, I couldn't believe it. But he never played professional or any level of football, I believe, again. And it's rumoured that he's gone into modelling, because he was a bit of a handsome chap, so I wouldn't be too surprised if that was the case. But certainly, he was no footballer. And the interesting thing is that you see plenty of sort of rotund footballers making a turn in the lower leagues of football, but this boy could honestly not kick a ball. We must have signed him on some sort of video evidence. There's no way that we properly scouted him. I mean, I noticed online when I was researching a bit earlier on that he signed for Real Vallecano before he came to us, and that was there in Spanish La Liga. But as soon as he arrived there, he got shipped straight into their reserves, and it's no wonder to me why he did. Now, back in 2014, we played Celtic. The game was at Firhill, and I remember looking at the betting odds in the game, and I was only about 16, 17 at the time, and I looked and I saw for Gabriel Piccolo to score and Partick Thistle to win 1-0. Now, boys, what do you think the betting odds were for this?
From what you've described, I would imagine at least 4-figure.
Well, you're close. You're close. It was 900 to 1. 900 to 1 for Gabriel Piccolo to score and Partick Thistle to win 1-0. I remember watching the game, or listening to the game rather, on my phone, and inside the first 5 minutes, Celtic were already 1 ahead, and we ended up losing the game 5-1. So that's my main memories of Gabriel Piccolo, and I think he's got a good shout of winning and getting sent to the reserves this week.
Did he have any international caps for Mexico?
What do you think?
Gabriel Rojo de la Vega Piccolo. Lastly then, it's myself. I have gone for Gael Kakuta. Does anyone remember Gael Kakuta?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's still playing football. He's only 28. He's not finished yet. He's only 28. So Gael Kakuta was kind of touted as being the next big thing. They'd bigged him up to be the player of a generation. He was the next big player to come out of France. Played all of his youth football at Lens, and I think when he was about 16 or 17, Chelsea moved heaven and earth to sign Gael. They did everything and ended up getting in a lot of trouble for it. I think they were banned for 2 transfer windows, a pretty hefty fine as well. Long story short, eventually Kakuta moves to Chelsea. Chelsea appeal the bans. They get them lifted. I think they ended up paying like a settlement or something of a couple of million to Lens. And Kakuta gets his footballing underway into the reserves, and he's doing really, really well. He's playing with Michael Ballack. Michael Ballack's just come back from injury. Ballack says, you need to go and watch this kid play. He's going to be the bee's knees. Anyway, so he's playing all of his reserve football. Eventually he gets injured. I think he does his ankle, comes back, training hard, gets into the first team, and he is just rubbish. In total, I think he plays 6 times for Chelsea. They ship him out on loan. He's at loan at places like Fulham, Bolton, Dijon, Vitesse, Lazio. Plays 2 games at Sevilla. Then he goes to China. They send him out on loan again. Deportivo La Coruña. Out to Amiens. Eventually signs for Rayo Vallecano. And now is playing his football back at home in France for Amiens. He was just a player who was bigged up to be the next big thing, to be something special. And it seemed whenever he started playing with the senior team, he just couldn't cut the mustard. And, Chelsea literally got themselves in so much trouble trying to sign him. And it was rumoured they were essentially just throwing money at Lens. FIFA and UEFA, they went absolutely mental. The whole thing was Platini and Blatter. They came out at the time and used words like child slavery, trafficking. This is what Chelsea were up to, which obviously was, ridiculous.
Extreme terms.
You need to enlighten us, Michael. How old was Kakuta at the time?
I think he was 16. Maybe 17 when he signed, but he was certainly under 18. And Blatter and Platini, their main issue, they were saying that players under 18 shouldn't be allowed to be signed for professional contracts, I think it was. But he just ended up being so disappointing. I don't know whether he did his ankle. It was a double fracture or something in his ankle. But he'd played, even when you look at his national team, he played for the under 16s, under 17s, 18s, 19s, 20s, the whole way through his career. And then just kind of amounts to nothing. He is still playing. He's playing in Amiens or Ligue 1, aren't they, in France? So he's playing there now. But yeah, just one of those players that was bigged up to be massive and just ended up being really disappointing.
If Piccolo doesn't win this, I swear to God.
Right, okay. So those are our nominations. And it's about time we voted. So who's made the strongest case then, and who should we be sending to the reserves?
I mean, I'm going to jump right in, and I'm not going to usually vote for myself, but I've seen this boy play, and literally the guy must have been signed from some sort of mistake. He cannot play football. Gabriel Piccolo is getting my vote to go to the reserves.
Were the players around him just not pish?
See, when you think of really rubbish players, like I can think of a really bad centre-back we had a couple of seasons back called Danny Devine. Now, Danny Devine was awful. A bomb scare, if you will. But now and again, he'd pull off an okay performance, and you could say, okay, he's maybe a good championship player in Scotland. But literally, Gabriel Piccolo, it was like he was wearing wellies. Honestly, he was cut about that pitch, and he just did not know where he was. It was also as if he was getting electric shocks every second. He just looked so uncomfortable. He thought, it's also quoted that he thought his particle teammates were speaking German to him. This guy has to go to the reserves. I'm making my case strongly this week.
Well, I think that I'm inclined to vote the same way. I've had the pleasure, Jamie, of course, of watching Partick Thistle on a few occasions, and I've seen some poor individual performances. So for you to say that this gentleman is comfortably the worst of the lot, then I think he very much deserves to go indefinitely to the reserves.
Yeah, I think the fact that you've just said that he thought his teammates were speaking German, I think that swayed my vote. That's quite the fact. And also, since he hasn't played for another club since he left you, it kind of alarm bells are ringing as to how good of a footballer he actually was. So my vote goes to Mr. Piccolo.
When you retire at age 24.
You've got to question your football career.
Okay, well, 3 votes then, and I suppose that's it decided. So Gabriel Rojo de la Vega Piccolo is heading to join Josie Altidore on the Backs to the Wall reserve bench. So, of course, we will be back next week with our Backs to the Wall feature. And now, I guess it's time to continue the lockdown accumulator. How did we all get on last week? Any big wins?
0. Absolutely 0.
Yeah, I think it's a common part of this feature where we each add -5 to our total each week.
Two of mine lost, and I didn't even bother checking the last one.
However, it is a new week, and with a new week comes change. We don't have any Nicaraguan football this week, do we?
No, but we've moved on to something more exciting. The Taiwan League. Now, I know that'll get a lot of you excited out there. We thought, what league I know better than the Nicaraguan League? The Taiwan League.
Indeed. Well, I will get us underway then. I've gone for, in Belarus, FC Vitebsk. They are 13-5 away to Izlok Minsk. In Tajikistan, I am going for FC Catalan, who are also away to Lokomotiv Parnir. Going with 2 aways there. And then finally, I'm finishing the treble with a home side in Taiwan. It is Taichung Futuro. They are 2-1 at home to Taipei City Tatung. So a fiver treble on those 3. Apologies to any of our Taiwanese listeners if I've not pronounced that correctly, but yeah, a fiver treble on those 3 returns a whopping £116.10.
So I've gone for Faturo to beat Tatung in the Taiwanese league. My Belarusian selection is Energetic to beat Neman Grodno. And in the Tajik League, I've gone for my main boys, Faizkand, to beat Estarafshan. Estarafshan, I believe, are doing pretty poorly, so I'm really hoping Faizkand can pull us home today or on Saturday.
How much does that get you?
It gets me about, for a fiver, it gets me about 80 quid back, so
not too
nice
bad
to line the pocket with.
Yeah, this week I've went for, in Belarus, Torpedo Belaz. They're at home. In the Tajikistan League, I like a bit of a derby, so seeing this up, I went for CSK Pamir Dushanbe away at Dushanbe 83. And in Taiwan, I have Taipei City Tantung, and they're away. £5 will return £42. It's actually, I think, my smallest odds so far, so I'm hoping for a win this week.
Safe as houses.
In Belarus, I've gone for FC Minsk to win away to Slavia in a mid-table clash. In Tajikistan, I've gone for FC Kuzand to win at home to Regar Taza Tursun Soda. In Taiwan, I've also gone with the team that Andrew went with, Taipei Tatung, to win away to Taichung.
Sounds like a good bet. I really do want to encourage our listeners to send us in their own treble there from the Taiwanese, Belarusian and Tajik leagues. Our good friend Ben O'Reilly, he sent his in last week, and unfortunately his got beat, but you'll get a shout out as well if you send us your betting slips.
Where can they send it to, Jamie?
So you can contact us on various platforms. On email, we are backstothewallpod at gmail.com, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter as well. So any of those platforms, just fire us a message and we'll be happy to look at your betting slip, and no doubt you'll gain more points than we will.
And Scott, what is it very important to remind our listeners of?
Yeah, just always remember, gamble responsibly.
So that just about wraps up our 3rd episode of the Backs to the Wall podcast. Hopefully you've enjoyed listening this week. And remember to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts or Anchor. We'll be back next week with our 4th episode of the Backs to the Wall podcast, and we hope to have you listening again very soon.